Picture this, folks. It's October 1942, and the world's a cauldron of chaos. Deep in the Pacific, there's a rugged little island called Guadalcanal, a sweltering jungle where American Marines are hanging on by the skin of their teeth. The Japanese are hammering us from every angle: sea, land, and especially the sky. And up there, in that roaring, storm-swept blue, one man's about to carve out his legend. His name's Joe Foss, a South Dakota farm boy turned Marine captain, flying a battered Grumman Wildcat like it's his last stand. They're calling him the Sky Sheriff now, and let me tell you, he's about to turn that sky into a battlefield straight out of a fireside epic. I'm Josh, your storyteller for this wild ride. So settle in, because we're diving headfirst into the fire. Now, imagine me sitting here with a cup of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Perfect fuel for a tale this big. I've got a little scrape on my forehead from tussling with a raccoon last night. Don't ask, it's a saga of its own. But I'm patched up and ready to roll. Let's take to the skies. Guadalcanal in '42 was no place for the timid. It was a steaming, mosquito-infested hellhole. Mud thick enough to swallow your boots, malaria lurking in every shadow, and Japanese bombers pounding down like clockwork. The Marines had scratched out a rough airstrip, Henderson Field, barely a dirt scar in the jungle. But it was our lifeline. Trouble was, the enemy owned the air with their Zeros, sleek, deadly fighters that could twist and turn like phantoms. That's where Joe Foss comes into the story. He's 27, with a jaw like granite and eyes sharp as a hawk's. Born in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, back in 1915, Joe grew up wrestling hogs and gazing skyward ever since Charles Lindbergh buzzed his family's farm in '27. By October 9th, he's landing at Henderson Field, leading a squadron of Wildcats, VMF 121. His plane's a Grumman Wildcat, stubby, rugged, not much to brag about, but Joe flew it like it was part of his soul. You can almost feel it. Those Wildcats coughing awake, the stench of fuel mingling with jungle rot, and the far-off rumble of enemy planes drawing near. Joe steps out of his cockpit, boots sinking into the mud, and surveys the mess. This wasn't some practice run. It was war, raw and unforgiving. He wasn't a green recruit. He'd hunted pheasants back home, learned to shoot straight and true. And up there, high above the Solomon Sea, he was about to unleash that knack on the Japanese like a storm breaking over the plains. Let's jump to October 13th, just 4 days after Joe touches down, and the sky's buzzing with trouble. A dozen Zeros come screaming in, escorting bombers hell-bent on smashing Henderson Field to rubble. Joe's up there with 8 Wildcats, his scrappy little band, facing odds that'd churn your gut. His wingman, a nervy guy I'll call Red, is clinging to his controls as the Zeros dive, guns blazing, turning the air into a howling tempest. Red's voice is tight with panic. He's got 2 Zeros on his tail, fast as the devil, ready to tear him apart. But Joe's calm as stone, telling him to hold steady, promising no one's cashing out today. Then he throws his Wildcat into a dive, bold as thunder, and locks onto that first Zero. Blam! His .50 calibers rip through it, and down it goes, spinning wild into the jungle below with a crash that echoes through the trees. 1 gone. But the Zeros don't quit. They wheel around, 5 of them now, tracer rounds streaking the sky, hunting Joe like wolves on a lone rider. He doesn't waver, just weaves through the clouds, picks his shot, and boom! Second Zero's history bursting into flames over the waves. Red's whooping now, stunned as Joe takes out another, shouting about how he smoked that one clean. Joe just grunts. 2 down, still work to do, and banks hard, catching a third zero in his sights. Bang! It's raining wreckage into the sea. 3 kills in his first real tangle. The rest of those zeros scatter like spooked deer, and Joe guides his boys back to Henderson Field, the crew hollering his name over the growl of engines. "Sky Sheriff Foss is here," they're yelling. But folks, this was just the opening shot. The real fireworks are still to come. Now let's roll ahead to October 25th, the day Joe Foss became a name whispered in awe. The Japanese aren't holding back this time. 20-plus zeros, bombers lumbering behind, a full-on aerial armada roaring in to bury Henderson Field for good. Joe's back in the sky, his Wildcat patched and snarling. But it's 5-to-1 odds. Picture it. The sun glinting off the ocean, clouds swirling like smoke over a burning village, and Joe staring down the fight of his life. His plane's taking punishment, bullets shredding the wings, oil splattering the canopy. But Joe's steady as bedrock. He spots their leader, the ace of the rising sun, they called him, darting through the chaos like a specter. This guy's a killer, taunting Joe over the radio, claiming the sky's theirs, daring him to surrender or burn. Joe just laughs, fierce as a prairie wind, telling him he was born in a dust storm and ready to prove who's boss. Then he yanks his Wildcat into a barrel roll, bullets zipping past his head, and fires. Bam! The ace's plane lights up like a flare, tumbling out of the sky in a fiery wreck. 4 more zeros swarm in, guns blazing, but Joe's on a tear now. He picks him off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 kills in one heart-pounding, sky-shaking showdown. His Wildcat's limping, ammo's spent, fuel's a whisper, but he fights till the last 0 bolts for cover. Red's voice is pure shock, marveling at how Joe just wiped out the whole pack. 5 in one run, a feat nobody'd seen before. Joe's quiet, just says it's another day's work, and guides their battered birds home. October 25th, 1942. 5 kills in a single scrap. Joe turned that sky into his own proving ground, and the Japanese limped away stunned. By the end of his tour, he'd rack up 26 kills, matching Eddie Rickenbacker's WWII tally, and earn the Medal of Honor, pinned on by FDR in '43. But that day? That was when the Sky Sheriff claimed the clouds. Let's take a breath and chew on some details. Those Wildcats Joe flew? They were tough little brutes, but zeros could outdance 'em any day. So how'd he do it? Pure skill. Back home he'd hunted with a rifle, 1 shot, 1 kill. He brought that sharpness to the cockpit, picking his targets clean and true. Here's a twist. He almost didn't make it as a pilot. The Marine brass thought 27 was too old. Imagine that. But Joe talked his way into flight school, flew circles around the doubters, and led a squadron into the fire. That's grit you can't fake. And Guadalcanal? That place was a crucible. Malaria hit harder than bullets some days. Joe caught it twice, lost 20 pounds, but kept climbing into that cockpit. Picture him up there, fever scorching his bones, hands steady on the stick, dodging lead while the world spun. That's the heart of a hero. So what's next for our Sky Sheriff? By January '43, he's headed home. Malaria finally grounded him, but not before he'd left his mark. His Wildcat was a wreck, riddled with holes, but he stepped out with that same steady grin. That strength carried him far. Governor of South Dakota, head of the NRA, even a stint on TV. He lived to 87, passed in 2003. But back in '42, he was untouchable. a lone eagle soaring over a sea of chaos. War's no picnic, though. Joe lost friends, good men who didn't come home. But he flew for them, kept that airstrip alive when it mattered most. That's what makes a story like this stick in your chest. And there you have it. The tale of Joe Foss, the Sky Sheriff of Guadalcanal. From a wind-swept farm to a roaring dogfight, he showed what one man can do when the world's crumbling. If this story lit a fire in you, pass it along. Tell your pals, your kin, even that raccoon still snickering at me out back. Swing by for more tales like this, or drop me a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. A nod to Tom Brokaw's The Greatest Generation for sparking this one. Great book. Worth your time. Till next time, keep your head up, your spirit strong, and maybe steer clear of raccoons in the dark. Catch you down the trail.